Today, we have the privilege of diving into the world of a true conservation hero, Mr. Chris Eberly. We're not just celebrating his recent induction into the National Military Fish and Wildlife Association Hall of Fame. We're getting to know the man behind the monumental achievements in bird conservation and natural resources management. Chris's journey began with the Department of Defense Partners in Flight program back in 1997, marking the start of an incredible mission to harmonize the defense mission with the nurturing of our natural landscapes. What makes Chris's work stand out is not just the breadth of his impact, spanning across robust avian programs and international accolades, but the depth of his passion for conservation and his ability to inspire collaboration and friendship wherever he goes. From his pioneering role as the DoD's first full-time bird conservation coordinator to the heartfelt efforts in elevating the DoD as a beacon of conservation excellence, Chris has been a guiding light. His leadership through Partners in Flight and beyond has been instrumental in protecting our feathered friends, ensuring the skies remain vibrant with the flutter of wings, from the rarest to the most common birds. But Chris's story isn't just about the awards or titles, it's about the journey, the challenges overcome, and the countless hearts he's touched along the way. As a former president of the National Military Fish and Wildlife Association and a beloved member of the conservation community, Chris's legacy is a testament to the power of dedication, collaboration, and genuine care for our planet. Join us as we chat with Chris Eberly, exploring his inspiring path, the moments that have defined his career, and the wisdom he shares from a life dedicated to conservation. It's an honor to share this conversation with you, bringing the insights and experiences of a remarkable individual who's truly made a difference.
I thought we'd start off with an introduction of who Chris Eberly is, give us an idea of growing up and what brought your interest out in wildlife and birds in particular, and what you were doing prior to coming to work for DoD as our Partners in Flight coordinator.
You know, I don't have strong memories like some people do of always being out, crawling around the mud, grabbing salamanders and things of that nature. We would go camping a lot when I was growing up, but by the time I got to college, I was very interested in computers and got my bachelor's degree in computer science and worked 11 years in the computer industry. And kind of hit this wall that I thought, you know, this was fun, but I'm kind of tired of doing this. I wanted to do something a little bit differently. So I looked around at grad schools. I was working in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and ended up at the University of Georgia in the School of Forest Resources. My intent was to study geographic information systems. GIS was just coming around back then. I won't say what year that was, but it was a little while ago, and seemed like a perfect thing to do with a computer background and to apply my computer background more into something in a natural resource realm. So unbeknownst to me, I guess, and I think I was the only one, I had this inherent interest in birds that had not yet bubbled up into the forefront of my consciousness. My parents were moving to another place, downsizing, and they would occasionally bring me boxes of things from growing up. And this is after I had started grad school. And in this one box, I pulled this paper out, you know, that whole whatever crepe paper that you drew things on in grade school. And it was a cardinal from 4th grade. And I thought, man, that's curious. And about that same time, one of my advisory committee members asked me to go out with him to the Piedmont National Wildlife Refuge to help him do a bird survey one morning. And I thought, well, that's interesting, bird survey, okay. I had this little pair of binoculars that I brought along, and we got out there, and we're talking the whole time. And I think he knew something that I didn't. And by the end of our morning of doing these surveys, I think I had that aha moment. And I said to him, so I could do my thesis on birds. He said, uh-huh. And people get paid to work with birds? Uh-huh. He can look at me like, you finally get it? I think, And I think that's when the bird thing finally clicked in for me. And then I just, at that point, it was all birds all the time. I still did some GIS type of work, but ended up doing my thesis on birds. Ended up as president of the local Audubon chapter while I was still in grad school, and got involved in the Georgia Breeding Bird Atlas project. And then after I graduated, I got my master's and started as a PhD student so that I could join this project and work with the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, the Athens Field Station, doing some GIS and remote sensing work, looking at trends of painted bunting in the southeast U.S., linking population trends to land use, land cover change. And during that year I was doing this project, I got a call from a guy who became a good friend of mine. It was about my age, actually, who was heading up the Georgia Breeding Bird Atlas, worked for Georgia Department of Natural Resources. He said, we've got this job announcement floating around the office that I think you'd be interested in. And it was for the Department of Defense hiring somebody to be a Partners in Flight coordinator. Well, interestingly, I knew all about Partners in Flight because as a member of the student chapter of the Wildlife Society, we had another Georgia DNR person, EJ Williams, come in to give a talk about Georgia Partners in Flight and this whole new thing called Partners in Flight. So I was fully aware of all of what was going on with Partners in Flight, and to me, that was sort of internally why I left the computer industry to go back. I didn't know it at the time, but when I heard about all this stuff, it just resonated with me.
Okay.
So when Todd Schneider called me about this job, it was just, okay, this, the stars are aligning. This sounds really interesting. So I put an application for it, applied for it, ended up getting the job. Interestingly, I had a master's, and the other two finalists had PhDs.
Okay.
And I think the reason I got the job was because I had spent 11 years in the working world, in the business world, in computers, and had experience dealing with executives in Fortune 100 companies. So I had some people skills that these other PhDs apparently did not have, and understood this thing about building partnerships and building relationships.
Well, certainly the work you did with Partners in Flight for Department of Defense involved a tremendous number of personalities and political skills that you excelled at. I mean, that's your. So I think that let's go ahead and jump into your career as you started with Partners in Flight and DoD. What were your expectations? And then what were your findings as reality set in? But please go ahead.
So the expectations, I think, of myself, and mostly because this is what was in the job description, what the people who funded the position, which came through DoD, from DoD through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and Peter Stengel, was that I was set about writing bird conservation plans for individual military bases. So I started that process talking with different natural resource managers, installation biologists at different military bases. I was working with Joe Houtzenroder, Joe was the one who really got the whole DoD Partners in Play program started, and essentially just ran into a wall of capacity that he didn't have the capacity to do what needed to be done.
Sure.
And that's why they were able to justify hiring somebody full time, which is what I took on. What we found out pretty early on was that, if we wrote a bird conservation plan for an installation, that'd look nice, it'd sit up on the shelf, it'd take a prominent spot, but they'd never look at it. They had these things called integrated natural resource management plans, and everything was supposed to be integrated into that one document. So that was, I guess, the first sort of shift in expectations that Peter Stengel at the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation was a little, it took him a while to really grasp onto that. He couldn't understand why after a year or two I didn't have all these bird conservation plans written. So it was a process of not just educating the military on the need for incorporating bird conservation into natural resource management, but also educating the hiring entity, so to speak, that their initial thinking of the approach maybe wasn't the most effective.
Yeah.
So had to kind of shift some expectations with that. But then, after we got started with that process, the natural resource community within DoD is just one of the most amazing. And I had no idea coming into it how passionate, dedicated, intelligent, and wily some of these people, most of these people were. Committed to what they're doing, just absolutely passionate about wildlife management. And that is a very contagious thing, and just really was fun to work with. And generally, installations were very open to having somebody help them focus more on bird conservation.
Well, I think that most installation managers could see a need from a conservation standpoint, but trying to integrate that with the military mission and figuring out what it was they could actually do, what they were capable of. It was very challenging at that time. We had very few programs to address things that if you weren't hunting it or fishing for it, or if it wasn't in direct conflict with running tanks or other military training, it was a lower priority. And the concept that Partners in Flight and you help bring to the table, this keeping common birds common and preventing listings, and therefore preventing future mission shutdowns. So it was tremendous. So how did, I'm sure that as you then went from installation thinking to the entire DoD basically, that took a different type of approach.
So, one of the good things and interesting things about working with bird conservation is that birds occupy such a wide range of habitats. Pretty much any habitat that a bird occupies is going to be occupied by all these other species that natural resource managers need to consider and focus on. And the other really good thing about birds is they're very visible in terms of sampling and doing surveys. They sing, they let you know they're there. The males are brightly colored. So birds...
I would inject that I think that it was important that because birds were so visible, commanders and soldiers and airmen, sailors could see those birds as well.
Yeah.
They might not see the endangered chipmunk or the rare snake, but they could see those birds.
Yeah. And part of the education process then was, because you could see the birds represent the overall health of the various ecosystems in which they live. And so you may not have to count every little bug, every little salamander, but if you have certain bird species in certain densities in these habitats, you have a pretty good assessment of the overall health of that system. And of course, as we know, having a healthy ecosystem is essential to sustaining military training activity.
Exactly.
And so that was just, in some ways, a very easy linkage to make. Base commanders could understand it because, again, they could see the birds. They could make that connection, and just helping them understand this is why focusing on birds will help with your mission.
It takes healthy, intact environments and ecosystems to do the mission.
Yeah.
And if you've got the habitat that the birds find acceptable, all the rest of the ecosystem follows along.
And I think the extension of that then is a more intentional meshing of the training mission and natural resource management. And I really love the example of Fort Riley, 100,000-acre property, half of which, about 50,000 acres, I believe, is still native tallgrass prairie, the single largest tract of native tallgrass prairie in existence. And that's because of the training mission. And what ended up happening there, initial conflicts with managing for Henslow sparrow, which was a rapidly declining grassland obligate species. And the training mission, it was creating a lot of tension. And there was a lot of effort given, Jeff Keating and others there, that got the training people to sit down with the resource management people, and in the end, looking at their burn areas for the prairie and the grassland, because they had to have fires periodically so they keep the fuel load down. Well, that periodicity, if you will, of the fires really coincided with maintaining tallgrass prairie habitat. And the burn unit size and the Henslow sparrow management unit size, they worked together so that those became the same, and it was mutually advantageous. And so this is a case where the training and the natural resource management sides coming together actually created that win-win. For training, that helps sustain the training in a better condition, and it also helps sustain a population declining grassland bird.
Well, certainly through your years of working for DoD, you were able to visit and actually have firsthand experience on many installations around the world, really, but certainly across North America and the continent. And I assume that that was very added to your ability to come up with eventually the nationwide strategic plan for bird conservation on military lands.
Yeah, that having that on the ground knowledge was very helpful. And to be honest, the first strategic plan actually came into being before I started my job. And it was, put together. I think Kyle Rambo had the lead on it, but these were the installation people who knew what was going on. But then subsequent revisions, I think, certainly benefited from my experiences of visiting installations, hearing and seeing firsthand what the managers go through, what challenges they face on a regular basis, and better understanding constraints that they have to deal with on a daily basis, and looking then at bird priorities, habitat and species priorities at the national level. One of the more successful aspects of what I was able to do is see constraints and limitations from a military natural resource management perspective, and to see the bird conservation state and federal agency resources that are available that had not really been linked up, and to help create these connections with people that in a lot of cases it was just a matter of there's this person, they didn't know about each other, but I did. So I was able to help bring people together that would help with state wildlife action plans, as well as with military integrated natural resource management plans, and then ultimately with resources at the state level and protecting the training mission at the installations. I'm
a little curious did you see any significant differences between, say, the generic Army installation versus an Air Force site versus a Navy station?
Well, size is the one thing. Army installations are generally the ones that have the most
land-based.
Yeah, land-based. And that's because they're a land-based training operation.
Right.
So they need more space and they need more buffer. A lot of the really good biodiverse areas on all installations, but I think in particular Army bases, are these buffer areas that are dual purpose, keep the training activities from going out, and then keep the public from coming in. And so, there's a lot of land, a lot of areas that really are not touched. And Air Force installations, the actual Air Force base itself usually was not all that large, but their ranges sometimes covered extensive amounts of land. And again, a lot of that was buffer land.
And it was the mission that had preserved a lot of those acres where birds and other wildlife could coexist with the military mission.
And I forget, at one time I knew all the statistics, the acreage sizes about on these ranges, the percent of the land that was actual range land, where they were detonated.
Active impact areas.
Versus how much was buffer. But the vast majority is just essentially buffer land. And so basically what that means is it's a refuge for anything and everything that lives there. And it's not managed for multiple uses.
Right.
It's left intact, so it's really not under any kind of management. So in terms of natural, native biodiversity, that's why those are sometimes the best ones out there.
Well, I'm a little curious. What are some of your favorite experiences during that period while you were the DoD PIF coordinator? I know you ran the steering committee, which was kind of a unique tool in and of itself. It's the first time I ran into the headquarters soliciting installation expertise and advice, and I know that it was something that was very helpful over the years that you were the coordinator.
Steering committee was one of the most amazing aspects of the job. So this was the DoD Partners in Play group consisted of installation natural resource people from every service branch from all over the country. So the knowledge base within that group, as you know, having sat through many of those meetings, was just phenomenal. If there was any natural resource issue out there, somebody or several people in the group were aware of it. Bringing that collective knowledge together at our annual meeting was one of the most informative and powerful tools I think that we had And it was that collective knowledge that helped with the major revision of the strategic plan. Me being able to get out on the ground and talk to people as well helped, and then my direct interactions with regulatory agency people to understand that side of it. But the steering committee, I guess I'd have to say I'm really proud of how that steering committee evolved and the work that we did. I was very intentional about moving the meeting around the country, either host it at a military installation or nearby, and always tried to get some bird conservation organization directly engaged in the meeting.
Right.
And a lot of times then it was somebody who had been funded through Legacy, perhaps, that we talked about the project that they did through Legacy, or they had worked with directly in installation, or in the case of going up to Boise with the Peregrine Fund.
Peregrine Fund, the Birds of Prey area, national area.
That looking at the work that they had helped you with Aplomato falcon reintroductions down in New Mexico and other places. So that the steering committee, I think, was really the driving force for not just the work and the momentum we had, but also in terms of overall acceptance within the headquarters level of the services and at DoD, because it directly engaged installation personnel. So it was working directly with the people who were doing the work.
I know at the national level you were able to represent us on several interagency committees and worked with Fish and Wildlife and many of the other resource agencies.
And that was, I think, one of the biggest reasons why DoD started to get recognized outside of DoD
we were
other federal
one of the first agencies with an MOU, right? A memorandum of understanding with migratory birds.
Yeah, we were. So I was able to, you might say, infiltrate the Division of Migratory Bird Management at Headquarters Fish and Wildlife Service. Spent a fair amount of time there at their office working with them. And, when the executive order came out, Executive Order 13086, I will never forget those numbers, federal agency responsibilities toward migratory bird management. We were, I think, the first agency to sign the required MOU that all federal agencies had to sign. That also then led to when the Council for the Conservation of Migratory Birds got organized, and that was also one of the requirements of that executive order. I was there working with Fish and Wildlife Service to get that going, helped chair that council at the beginning, and we started a group that was instrumental in developing conservation measures. And that development of conservation measures then also was instrumental in helping craft the final rule, which I guess, and I'm not sure who called it what, but Fish and Wildlife Service called it one thing, DoD called it another, the readiness rule or the migratory bird rule. And that was just groundbreaking in that this rule, if DoD would follow these conservation measures and do these actions, which we were doing because of the investment they made in bird conservation through the DoD Partner Supply Program, we do those things, then in the course of normal training and testing activities, if we happen to incidentally or unintentionally take migratory birds, it's okay. And that was so unique. And what a lot of people don't realize, there were a lot of people upset about that. They just said, DOD was getting a free pass with all that. But what they didn't realize, and when they finally read the rule, and all that went into it, and all the DoD was doing, they realized that in the end, DoD was providing a net gain.
A net gain to the
migratory
resource.
birds. So it wasn't a free pass. We were actually putting in the work, protecting birds in order to protect the mission.
And one of the things that I recall is that for many years at the annual NMFWA workshops, annual meetings, you were often the catalyst for bringing in Fish and Wildlife Service and NGOs and other partner organizations to provide training to the many DoD biologists and natural resource managers that attend the meetings.
One of the roles that I felt that my job should play was bridging the divide that previously may have existed between the regulatory agencies and DoD, particularly at the leadership level. And I think that was one aspect I feel that I did fairly well. And, a lot of it is just getting two sides to start a dialogue. And I was the person that was there to be able to do that. And one of those aspects then was with the training. In my conversations with various people at the Fish and Wildlife Service in migratory birds, I knew they had this class about bird conservation, migratory trust responsibility that they primarily taught the Fish and Wildlife Service employees. But I thought, DoD managers would benefit greatly from all that. So I worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service folks and the National Conservation Training Center folks, and we actually adapted that course to a DoD audience and held it at Fort Carson twice. We actually went out to Marine Corps Base Hawaii once and held it out there. And then we made a short course, a one-day short course that we held at the Sustainability Conference. Yeah. And that was geared toward higher level people, some of the headquarters people, to just really bring Fish and Wildlife Service and DoD leadership together at a training level for that mutual understanding. And I think those types of efforts really have paid benefits over the years at bringing the knowledge level up on both sides, because that also got the dialogue started between people. And once people started talking, they realized there was actually mutual interest in doing the right thing.
Sure.
And before that, they just never really even talked.
Before we shift to the current situation, are there any favorite personalities or any favorite stories or experiences that you want to share with the folks that might be watching the video?
Well, I would be very remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about my NMFWA experience too. And that's the other thing. I started the DoD Partners in Flight job at the end of 1997. My very first NMFWA conference was Orlando in 98. And, that 1998 was just a year of eye-openers for me. And that conference just kind of blew my mind.
We had just passed the Sykes Act Improvement Amendment, and all of a sudden there was going to be money coming for integrated natural resource management plans.
And just to meet so many people from around the country, it was the beginning of, obviously a wonderful relationship. And I just felt I needed to get engaged with this group. And so I started doing what I could with that. And, of course, show interest to NMFWA, they will get you involved.
That's right.
And I do not regret that for a moment. And of course, you
were a session chair or a technical session leader for probably about your entire career with DoD.
And, that's the kind of thing I really enjoyed. And I think one of the other experiences that I'm really grateful I had the opportunity to do was working more closely with WMI. And I believe it was the 2008 conference in Phoenix. Steve Helfert and I actually had started talking a year or two before, talked with Dick McCabe about, here's this group, NMFWA, a bunch of really dedicated, smart natural resource people going to this North American Wildlife and Natural Resources Conference, a group of really smart, dedicated resource people. Why don't we do more to interact together and get everybody talking? And, of course, the NMFWA in me wanted the NMFWA people to get more engaged and let the non-NMFWA people know about what we're doing and how well we do it. And the end result of that was that one of the 4 special sessions that WMI had in Phoenix was a DoD session. And it was the first time that we were allowed to invade their special sessions. And it was the best attended of all 4 of those special sessions. And I think that really helped launch where we are today with, the relationship with WMI in this conference. And I think that's, my role in trying to build these relationships, build partnerships. I feel that's kind of been what I've done well in my career. And, hopefully it's a legacy that other people think is worthy.
Well, that's part of why you're in the Hall of Fame now. So all good things come to an end, and funding for the legacy program started waning a decade or more ago, and the Partners in Flight share kind of dwindled as well, and eventually your position disappeared. So tell us what is going on with Chris Eberly since that time, and what you're doing now and where you're headed in the future.
So yeah, I kind of had the forewarning that funding was going to be going away. So I had a little bit of time to start looking for other opportunities. So I ended up, after the legacy funding was depleted, so to speak, that I moved to Texas and started as Gulf Coast Bird Observatory. That didn't go quite as well as I'd hoped. And they were going through some issues at the time that I inherited that I did as best I could with, and then departed there. And I think hopefully set the stage for they're in good shape now. But after that, I moved back up to where I had been living in Northern Virginia, and started working with the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership, and have been director of that for the last 5 years. Working with birds is just, obviously my passion.
Your wife has got to be pretty tolerant of all your
She is very tolerant. Let's just say she's not a birder, but she definitely understands other fashion.
It's that passion that...
so she understands why I do the things I do. She doesn't understand what I do necessarily. Sometimes she says, I don't know why you do that, but I get it. But what I hope to start moving more into is, I love traveling to other countries. Of course, for the birds, but also for the people, the food, the wine, all the good things. So I'm starting to try to do more with leading first trips to other countries. Just got back from Chile a month ago, and that's the kind of thing I could see myself doing long into the future. So hopefully that's where I will transition and end up, and the way to see all over the world, hopefully meet good people, see great birds.
Well, thank you, Chris. I think that we've covered quite a swath of almost your entire life over the course of the interview. And I think that the information you share with us is outstanding. It helps provide some context and insight into a Hall of Famer here with the National Military Fish and Wildlife Association.
Well, I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and this is truly an honor to become a member of the NMFWA Hall of Fame, and I thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you.